Well, a very good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our panel discussion as part of our virtual sleepover. My name's Ali. Some of you may have been following my videos on the Facebook group for the last few weeks. And for anyone who can't easily get to a screen, I'm a white man with a dark, curly hair and beard, and my pronouns are he, him, and his. Now, we are joined today by three fantastic scientists from the School of Life Sciences at the University of Dundee. So I'm going to very briefly introduce you to them. We have Leslie Ann Pearson, who is a biochemist working in the drug discovery unit, which means that she works on new medicines, and she is the proud staff to two cats. Now, next we have Nicholas Stanley-Wall, who's a professor of microbiology and currently the guardian to many, many tadpoles. Nicola, great to see you. And finally, we have Professor Inka Netka, who is the Dean of the School of Life Sciences, which means she's our boss, and an aspiring yoga guru. So it's great to see everyone here. Now, before I let you hear more from them about themselves, I want to just give you a few little tips about how the afternoon's running, okay? So I work for something called the Wellcome Centre for Anti-Infectives Research, and we've been working with Girlguiding Dundee to bring this virtual sleepover to you. And we are part of the School of Life Sciences at the University of Dundee. Now, as a centre, we have three key missions. So we research new medicines to fight something called neglected tropical diseases. We are training scientists from around the world in the art and science of what we call drug discovery, so they can help find new medicines too. And also, we like to meet the public, tell them about our work, find out what they think about science. And that's why we're here today. So I'm really delighted to see so many people with us. And thank you all for everything you've been putting on Facebook today, all the pictures, the videos, everything is absolutely fantastic. Now for Teams Live, there are closed captions available, so do have a look at them if you want to. Thank you everyone who's been putting in questions for our panel. We've got loads and loads of them here. Now, because we're on a slight delay, if you ask us a question live, we won't hear it for a little while, okay, if you type those in. But do keep asking us questions and we'll circle back and we'll get to as many of them as we possibly can. I can't promise we'll manage them all. And if people have asked the same things, we've kind of smooshed them into one. But they're all great and we appreciate them all. And if there are any technical gremlins, that occasionally happens with these live events, I'm afraid. So if a camera freezes, we're sorry. If any of us come back in and you can't hear us and our mouths are moving, that means we've forgotten to unmute our microphones. So you can help us out, perhaps. If you shout as loudly as you can at your screen, you're on mute. Okay, shall we have a little practice of that together after three, okay? 1, 2, 3, you're on mute. I will assume I could hear you. Okay, so I hope we have a fabulous event. Keep asking us your questions. I'm going to hand over now to the first of our scientists, who is Leslie Ann, who is our biochemist. So, Leslie Ann, tell us who you are and your story of yourself.
Thanks very much, Ali. That was such a lovely, glowing introduction. Okay, as Ali said, my name's Leslie Ann. I am a white person with long black hair and blue eyebrows, which, you know, are fabulous. And my pronouns are she, her. Okay, so a bit about myself. So I'm a biochemist, which is a complicated sounding word, really, isn't it? And that means I'm interested in the chemistry of living things. So by chemistry, we mean all the little reactions that go on inside your cells. And the way that I work is that I look at that kind of thing to help us work to develop new medicine. So when there is a new medicine we want to work on, I'm the person that invents all the little tests we do to see if it's going to work. I always wanted to be a scientist since I was very young. When I was 12, I had a careers chat that they gave us at school, so you could pick your subjects. And I said I wanted to be a biochemist. I don't know where I got the word. I assume I read it somewhere and thought it sounded fancy. But I wanted to be a biochemist when I was 12. And then I was lucky enough to do biochemistry at the University of Dundee, where I now work. So I'm the luckiest person in the world because my job is amazing. I get to move very small amounts of liquid from here to here, but in a way that helps us find out more about the kinds of medicines that we're working on. So the kinds of things that I've worked on, I've worked on medicines to help treat malaria. I also recently worked on medicines looking at the coronavirus, which was very exciting. Yeah, that's pretty much what I do, and where I've come from. I'm aware I'm quite brief when it comes down to it, because I feel like my life was very kind of, I wanted to do science and then I did science. I did take a little bit of time out to do other work when I came out of university, because I was a little bit confused when I graduated, like a lot of people are, I think. And I did a few other things. I worked in an office for a while, but then I was very lucky. I got to come back in and just kind of work in the science, and that's been great. And another one of the things I really, really like about my job is getting to go out and speak to the public and talk to people about science. I have to be prevented from talking to people about science at parties. So I am that person. Anyway, I think that's quite enough hearing about me and the interesting things I think about science. And I think it would be great if we heard from Nicola next. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Leslie-Ann. Hi, everyone. It's really great to be here. So my name is Nicola and my pronouns are she, her. I am white and I've got chin-length brown to white hair and I have blue eyes, and I'm currently wearing a bright pink cardigan. So as Ali said, I'm a professor of microbiology and I work at the University of Dundee, which is in Scotland. I've lived in Dundee for about 15 years now, and I'd like to tell you about how I ended up here in Scotland. So I grew up just outside Glasgow and I played the trumpet and enjoyed working at the local country park. And in the country park, I built fences, I picked up litter, and I helped with the children's wildlife club that's called the Mugdock Moles. I really enjoyed science at school, and I also enjoyed helping people. And I did wonder if I wanted to become a nurse, but in the end, I decided to go to university to study biology. And I chose to go to the University of East Anglia, which is in Norwich in the east of England. And I chose the University of East Anglia as it has a beautiful campus, and there was also the opportunities for students to take a year out during their degree to work in industry. And that's something that I did, and I worked in Cambridge for a year. I really enjoyed my time at university, and I met someone called Stephen, who is now my husband. So after graduating from my undergraduate degree, I stayed in Norwich to do another degree, and that was called my PhD. And during my PhD, I was based in a laboratory all of the time, and I studied how bacteria move things that they make on the inside of them to how they move them to the outside of them. Doing my PhD was a lot of fun and hard work. So Stephen also did a PhD, and when we both graduated, we moved to Los Angeles in the United States, and we lived in Hollywood, where we worked as scientists. And we both really loved living in Los Angeles. And while we were working hard, we also made sure that we traveled and saw loads of amazing sites, including the Grand Canyon and Yellowstone National Park. And it was in Los Angeles that I started investigating how bacteria stick together to form groups and clusters of cells that are called biofilms. So the word biofilm is one that you might not know or might not have heard of, but you'll all have to brush your teeth. And the reason you're brushing your teeth is that they have a biofilm that grows on them, the bacteria that grows on them. So after a few years of being in Los Angeles, Stephen and I moved back to the United Kingdom, and I started working at the University of Dundee. My lab and I still study how bacteria form biofilms, and I love that the surprises keep coming from learning from how the bacteria interact. Outside the lab, I love spending time with my family, I love knitting, and I like running. And I think I will leave it there, and I'm going to pass over to Inka.
Well, welcome everybody, and it's really exciting. I wish I could see you all, but there's at least 103 of you, so that might be very difficult. Anyway, I am the Dean of the School of Life Sciences. I am also white. I am a middle-aged woman, and I go by the pronouns she and her. I have short blondish hair, although because we haven't been able to go to the hairdresser, it's not as short as I'd like it to be. And I really like the color blue, and as you see, I'm wearing all blue. It's my favorite color. So I have not quite as glamorous a story as Nicola. I've never lived in LA, although as you may hear from the way I sound, I spent a lot of time in America. I lived there for quite a long time. However, originally I came from Germany. I grew up in a small town in northern Germany where I went to the local schools, and I had no idea what I wanted to be. And the fact that I was really interested in both maths and English gives you a bit of an idea of that. The only thing I knew I wanted to do was that I wanted to leave Germany, and apparently I knew that much sooner than I remember. My mother recalls or reminds me what I said to her on this subject when I was only 15. Anyway, so I did, is I moved to California after I finished school, and I worked for a little while, and I ended up going to university there. And also, like Leslie Ann, I studied biochemistry, which I really think is the chemistry of the machines that make life happen. And I was really excited about that. I was originally thinking of becoming a doctor, but I found biochemistry much more exciting. I then moved on and went from the molecules, all the machines, the biological machines that we refer to when we talk about biochemistry, to really be interested in how cells behave. And after I did my doctorate, which I did in San Francisco, I then started moving to an area south of San Francisco where I started to look at how cells work together. And when I was there, I had one of those rare moments where I discovered something that I thought was so exciting because it really changed how we thought about something, and it turned out to be related to colon cancer. And that's what I still work on. I try to understand how the behavior of different molecules inside cells make cells do the things they do, and how cells work together to create the organs and all the tissues in our bodies. And that's important because when they don't do that properly, that's when we get diseases like cancer, like inflammation, infections, and all the other things we know that trouble us. And in a way, as you heard, I'm now the dean. That means I'm the boss of lots of people. It still surprises me sometimes, but it's not so different if you think about, I'm trying to understand how cells work to make organs and tissue. Organs and tissue have to work together to make bodies. We all have incredibly diverse bodies, but fundamentally, they kind of do the same things because that's what biology is. And being a dean is a little bit at the next level. It's making sure that people work together really well, that they can understand that there are differences, so that together we can do the best science that allows us to make the medicines, to understand how bacteria work, so we can use them and also make sure they don't harm us in some cases. And that's really how I see my job now. So I'm still a scientist, but I've moved on to really try to help other scientists. And it's really exciting to be here to share all these different experiences. And I'd like to hand back to Ali and really look forward to your questions.
Thank you all so much for those fantastic introductions. I'm certainly struck by, well, some very glamorous places that you've been and things that you've done. But I think you've really hit that point that science is all about collaboration and working with each other across teams, different disciplines. And this kind of image of the lone scientist is just not true. We're all about collaboration and working together. And I suppose so is Girlguiding. So it's a really nice parallel that we've found. Okay, so I want to start working through some of those questions that you all have been sending us in, which are fantastic. Now, before we started, we had a bit of a chat, and I did ask our scientists if any of them were brownies or guides. And it turns out, actually, they weren't. A few different things, but none of them were brownies or guides. But I'm going to throw a bit of another question to each of them. And I think we'll probably answer in the order, if we can, Nicola, Inka, Leslie Ann. So some of you discussed it. Did you always want to be a scientist? Or was there anyone or anything who really inspired you on your journey to being a scientist? So Nicola, let's start with you if you have an answer.
Thanks, Ali. So, no, I didn't always want to be a scientist. I was just, I think I mentioned may have wanted to be a nurse or a doctor, but I'm actually not very good when it comes to people being hurt. And so that kind of ruled that out. And through working at the country park, I very much enjoyed the world around us. So looking at frog spawn, looking at the trees, understanding what was going on in life. And so I initially went to university to study biology, but actually ecology and the larger animals and the larger scientific topics. But then when I was there, really, I discovered that I liked the insides of the organisms, understanding how our DNA works and how that controls how bacteria work as well. And so that's how I ended up as a microbiologist. And I really like bacteria or working with bacteria, because while many people will think about them as causing illness, which they do. Actually, without bacteria, we wouldn't have chocolate, we wouldn't have things we put in toothpaste, we wouldn't have yogurt. There's so many things that depend on bacteria in our world. Plant growth, our growth, everything. Yeah, so bacteria are amazing.
And certainly we've found some interesting links with ice cream in your research.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
So Inka, same question. Did you always want to be a scientist? And was there anyone or anything that really inspired you?
So as I alluded to, and then I didn't say how I got to be a scientist, I had no idea what I wanted to be, and being a scientist certainly never occurred to me. And it was really a process of discovery. And I think when I think back, the one thing I knew is I really like to figure out how things work. And I'm always asked a lot of questions so I can understand. And it frustrates me when I don't understand something. That is still true. So I think that probably was a natural inclination. And then biochemistry was exciting. Like Nicola, I really like helping people. And so I was interested in medicine, but not the medical part. So then I said, well, but there's biology that is relevant to medicine and biochemistry in particular. And that's really how I got into it. And then I discovered cells and how they work together. And there's just so much going on. And it's just fascinating. And to me, looking down a microscope and seeing individual cells or whole tissues, which we now can do their stuff, it's just phenomenal. I mean, some people, there were some questions about going into space. I have no desire to do that, but take me down into the tissues and the cells. I like to be there. That's what interests me. And so that's why I ended up there. And was there anybody really inspiring? When I was an undergraduate, I had this phenomenal chemistry teacher. Her name was Ruth Yaffe. She was really tough. And she would give us exams on things that we hadn't even studied yet. But she did that because she knew we could do it. And she's the first person really to say to me, you know, to give me the confidence to say, yeah, you can do this. You're smart enough and you work hard enough. You can do this. And I think that was probably, thinking back, she was a really important person. And she was also a phenomenal woman. She was the first woman on campus to wear trousers. So I just thought she was great. So.
Amazing. Okay, and Leslie Ann, did you always want to be a scientist? Any inspiration there for you?
Yes, yes. And it's actually very similar to Inka, to be honest. I just like knowing stuff. I'm outside of science. I'm a repository of pointless information. I just pick up just little tidbits here, and I just love knowing things. So just learning stuff just really excited me. And the more I learned about biochemistry, the more exciting I found it. I think it is pure and beautiful and logical, and all the little interweaving pathways and the way enzymes work. Oh, it's fabulous. What is not to love? So I get like that about the science. So yeah, I've always been like that. When I was in school, we had a really, really amazing biology teacher called Dr. McIntyre. And there's actually a few people who I know who are still working in science, one of whom still works in our building, who was in the same biology class as me. So he must have done a good job, because we all came to Dundee to study biochemistry afterwards. But yeah, I just learning things and then learning lab techniques was just, there's nothing more peaceful than just a nice complicated experiment. You've got all your little bits laid out, and it's just, yeah, just knowing things and learning things was it for me.
Okay, fantastic. And actually, Leslie Ann, I'm going to bounce a question back to you, because we've just had one come in through the Teams Live from Elizabeth. So what sort of things do you use to make medicines? Leslie Ann, tell us.
That's a big question. What sort of things do you use to make medicines?
It is. In 2 minutes or less.
2 minutes or less. This is a challenge. Okay, in the world, there are lots of different things we call reagents. So there are different things that react with each other. So say, for example, when you're baking, if you put all of the ingredients to a cake and you just lie them out next to each other, they're not going to spontaneously become a cake. But if you mix them together in the right order and you add heat, they transform into a cake. And the chemistry that is used to make new medicines is pretty much the same thing. There will be all these little, what chemists refer to as starting material, which they will heat up or put electricity through or do other things, and they will stick together in new ways, and then they'll end up with a funky molecule that looks a bit like this, and then that's where we end up. So all sorts of different things, but they have to be small things to start with that you put together to make bigger things. I don't know if that...
It's one of those fantastic questions. It's really difficult to answer quickly, but it's so important. So yeah, great stuff. Keep those questions coming in. Okay, so our next question. Oh, I like this one. So we'll go in the order Inka, Nicola, Leslie Ann. So what's the best or most exciting thing that you've discovered in the course of your research? Inka, what do you think? Any immediate reactions?
Well, I had sort of 3 moments in my career. I was thinking about this. That was like where I went, wow, this is so exciting, where I was run down the hall and have to show somebody. And I guess one of them relates to this discovery that really I've been working on ever since. And it was finding that a particular molecule that people had thought of in one context and thought that this is one thing it does. And I found that it also does all these other things, and it opened up a whole new field. And I will never forget the moment when, again, it involved a microscope, and you sit in a dark room and you look down and you go, wow, and completely, well, I didn't know what to expect, and there it was. And I remember running down the hall to my boss and say, oh, you got to come here, you have to see this. And he thought I was completely mad. And I think later he told of the event spoke of this a little differently. He thought, no, I'm not sure. But in the end, it has turned out to be something that's changed a bit of how we think about something. And that was immensely exciting. So.
Fantastic. Nicola, same question. The best, most exciting thing.
Thanks, Ali. I think one of the most exciting things my lab has worked on has been how bacteria make a waterproof raincoat. And they do this using something that they make and put out into the outside environment, and it forms basically a coat over themselves. And the coat that they make makes them more waterproof than Teflon that you might find in your frying pan. So if you were to drop a little bit of water into a frying pan that's a non-stick frying pan, it wouldn't soak in everywhere. It would just sit on the top. And our bacteria make a waterproof coat that's even more powerful than the Teflon in a frying pan. So I think that's what it is. And we actually can use the waterproof coat for other things. For example, to keep ice cream stable and more structured to stop it melting as quickly. So I think that's one of the most exciting things my lab has worked on.
Very cool. And Leslie Ann, how about you?
The most exciting thing I have discovered quite recently, actually, is I've been working on a new protein. It's not really a new protein. We're pretty sure you've always had it. It's just no one's seen it before. What's the quickest way of describing this? It puts like a little pin on something to hold it in place. It's called a transferase. It puts a pin on something. And all of the papers that we have read about this new protein, and there's only a handful because it says pretty new and exciting, think that it goes in the order A, B, C, D. Does this first, then that happens, then that happens, then that happens. And the work I've done, I haven't written down yet, so secret. It's not that order at all. It's actually DCBA, and it's totally different than what the papers say. And the papers have made an assumption, and I have done an experiment and found that the order is different. So I know something no one else does. Secret. And I'm very excited. And I don't know what that means yet because it's just the start. Because as I say, brand new protein could mean lots of things. Could be, something a little bit quieter. But yeah, brand new knowledge.
And that really is the exciting moment of being a scientist, when you know something that no one else in the world knows. No one else anywhere in the world, and you're the first person who knows it. Fantastic. Okay, we're getting some brilliant questions coming in through the audience. Here's a great one, in fact. So we shall go in the order Nicola, Leslie Ann, Inka this time. What would the day in life of the scientist be like? So what does kind of a day in your work look like? And that might be a difficult question because there might be lots of different days, but Nicola, care to have a stab at it?
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, you're pretty much seeing my day. It's here. because at the moment, because of the pandemic, I am working from home and I'm not in the lab because I don't actually do lab work anymore. There are students and research scientists who work in the team with me, and they are based in the lab. But my personal overall day can be incredibly varied. It can be meeting people, it can be looking at results, it can be working on a talk or a publication, it can be traveling to visit collaborators or go to a meeting. Yeah, highly varied, but less so at the moment given the pandemic. How about you, Inka?
Did you want me to go next, Sally? My day is similarly, I work mostly from home. I haven't done experiments in a long time. I currently don't actually have anybody doing experiments, but I work with people in several other countries and also in Sheffield, for instance, on projects together. So where my expertise and what they work on collaborate. And so this is this multidisciplinarity. So I've worked with medics, I've worked with engineers, and I really like that to work together to solve problems related to our interests. My day mostly consists of talking to very different people, from the principal of the university to students to colleagues to people who help with our operations because things aren't going right in the building, or we need to sort something out, or we need to fix something about the teaching, and to all kinds of staff, and that's what I do right now. And I also still teach, and I really enjoy that. And sometimes I have honor students and I work with them on some of their science, and really anything in between. And when we're not working from home, I would spend a lot of time walking through our building, trying to catch up with people. I'd have to write documents, policies, make sure that we do all the right things in the building, in the world in general, in the university, and that people know what's going on. And you can imagine that that's something that's really tricky right now, because sharing what's going on in the right way, in a way that is relevant, and not telling people things that they may not know about, and making the right decisions is something that is often an important part of my day. And getting the words right to share what needs to be shared. But when we can't see people and we don't quite know what state they're in is really tricky right now. And I really miss seeing my colleagues and having different types of interactions. But as Nicola said, the people in the lab need to be in the buildings, but they can only do what they do at a laboratory bench where the equipment is, where things are happening. And so making sure that can happen requires so many different things. And I try to do that, obviously with lots of help.
Fantastic. And Leslie Ann?
I'm relatively lucky, so I have my little science corner at home with my science posters on the wall, which makes me feel very happy. And even before the pandemic, I was 50% in the office, 50% in the lab. So now what will happen is I'll get up in the morning and I'll come and I'll check my emails and I see if there's anything interesting happening there. I run our department's Twitter account. So I'll go and see if there's been any interest in science that's been happening that I can share on our Twitter or talk about on our Twitter, see if there's anything happening there. And then I'll maybe design an experiment, and then I get on my bike and I cycle into work. That's the cycling movement that I do, hands back and forward. I cycle into work and then I'll get myself set up. And then a lot of my experiments, like I said, involve moving very tiny amounts of liquid from here to here, but in such a way that a signal happens, and then I get to use a really fancy, exciting piece of machinery on a different floor called a rapid fire, which is very fancy, and I get to read plates on that. So, and then once I've done with my experiments, I'll see if anybody else needs help. So one of the things that we've done as part of the pandemic is if somebody else's data has finished, you'll message them and say it's done. Do you want me to do something with it? You know, we all kind of help each other out that way. We'll have little meetings to talk about the experiments we're doing at the minute, to see if there's any plans for new experiments to happen. Before, we used to have those face-to-face, but now we do them over Teams. I'm convinced everybody I know is in fact two-dimensional. I think they're all paper people now.
I certainly am, yes.
I mean, I've suspected it for a long time, Ali. I think the curls in your beard are just to distract us into believing you're in fact three-dimensional. But yeah, experiments on the bench and then analysing the data and then talking about it with other people to see what kind of decisions we can make, and then really trying to help each other as much as we can. Yes, what my day's like at the minute.
Fantastic. Now, we've been getting loads of questions coming, which is great. I'm sure we're not going to get time to go through all of them, but we will keep chatting on Facebook, so we'll try and get through some more. But Nicola, I know you've been looking at the questions at the side and seeing as they come in. And actually, the other side, just have a little look at the sidebar. Nicola, have you picked any of your favourite questions that you'd like to answer and tell us about?
Thanks, Ali. Yeah, there's loads of really great questions here. I might just give a couple of one-liners to some of them. So Molly asks about what I like most about, or what we like most about being a scientist. And to me, it's the discovery and the variability that I like the most. The joy of not really knowing what your day is going to be, and then the variety that comes with it. Then Faith has asked if I could be any other type of scientist, what would we be? I think at the moment I'd like to be involved in climate heating to understand more about how we can protect our climate from the damage that we are doing. So that would be an area that I would like to be involved in more. And if I take one more, so Anonymous has asked, do you often talk about science in your daily life? Is it something you transfer to other things that you do? So I talk about aliquoting out food to put into the freezer if I make a big batch. I don't know if that's something that non-scientist families do. And I also have tadpoles growing and developing in my dining room. I'm not sure whether that counts too, but I would perhaps say that might be linked to me being a scientist. How about you, Inka? Are there any questions that you...
I wanted to follow up on the question of, do we talk about science in my daily life? So my children, I have 2 children, sometimes over dinner we would talk about our days, because they would tell me about their days and I would tell them about mine. And because I work on the gut and digestion, so we would sometimes talk about poo at the dinner table, and my children would not really, and they would say, "Oh, Mom, do we have to talk about that?" But I said, "Oh yeah, but it's really exciting." And so they neither one is a scientist. One has become an engineer, and the other one studied English and philosophy. So they do very different things, which is very exciting, and I learned from them. So yes, when you're trying to understand how things work, then often I approach other things. I ask those questions, and anyway, so yes. And I'm trying to look at some other questions. Why do we have side effects after some diseases? I think, particularly right now, it's because diseases don't just affect one part of the body. I think it's because the body is a system. Yes, and as a aspiring yoga teacher, I know a lot about this. When you twist your knee or when you wiggle your foot, because of how everything is connected, that actually has reactions in your spine, in your shoulders. If you ever put your hands at the very bottom, the round bit behind your neck, there's sort of two little dents. If you push there, that actually relaxes some things in your eyeballs because the optic nerve comes out there. So it's those, and in a way, if a disease affects a certain organ, then of course that organ is part of the whole physical body system, and that's going to have an effect on other things. And depending on your immune system and how you're put together, some of us, for instance, in yoga, it's important. Some people have really long arms. I have really long arms. Some people have short arms. The same is true. Some people have slightly different composition in their immune system. That means they react to things slightly different. And I hate this when we say this, but it is true. It's very complicated, and a lot of these things depend on the detail. But ultimately, because we're a system where things are connected indirectly or directly, that's one reason we have side effects after diseases.
And we've learned through some of the videos on Facebook that some people can knock a cork over with their nose, and other people, like me, cannot without falling over. Leslie Ann, any quick questions that you'd like to fire through in there?
I've seen 2 that I think are kind of related. So the first one's from Faith, which is, why did you choose the type of science that you work in now? So when I was at school, you got to do biology, chemistry and physics. And if you wanted to do science and you also weren't 100% certain where that was going to go, you did biology, chemistry and physics. And physics just made me go, I don't like it. They would explain things and I would go, I don't like it. It didn't make sense. My brain, it hurt. It fell out. I did not enjoy it. Chemistry, I did okay, except for every time they changed something, I was like, no, I don't like it anymore. Whereas biology, every time I learned something more about biology, it made more sense. And then there was another question I didn't quite catch the name, which was about what was like the first experiment that really kind of inspired you into that kind of thing. And I remember learning about PCR, the polymerase chain reaction. I think that's what it is. And I just remember having it explained to me, and it just blew my mind because it was just so beautiful. So what you do is you have a piece of DNA and then you heat it up and the DNA separates. And then you have all the little bitty building blocks that slot into place and build 2 chains of DNA. Now you have 2, and then you cool it down, it's fine. And then you heat it up again and the 2 split, and then they become 4 individual ones. Then you cool it down and then they make some more. And I'm explaining it very poorly because we have very little time, but honestly, when it was explained to me, I was just like, that is amazing. That's the best thing I've ever heard. That's so cool and nifty and exciting. And that inspired, I might sound a little bit overexcited. It was fantastic. You should go and look it up. It's amazing.
It's pretty cool. Thank you so much, Leslie. Okay, we're actually just about out of time here. It's absolutely flown by, certainly for me. So we've had a few questions about this, which I want to bounce off our panel. I think we'll go in the order Inka, Leslie Ann, Nicola. We've had a few questions about what it's like to be a woman working in science. Do you find it hard being in your field? Are there special challenges you face? And I think given that we have an audience of girls and young women today, is there anything you'd like to say to them about your experience? So who did I say first? I can't remember. You'd need to tell me.
You said Inka.
Anything you'd like to say?
I would like to say it doesn't matter. I mean, obviously I've been a woman in science for a long time. When I trained to get my PhD, I worked for a woman, and I remember asking her the same question, and she gave me a really good answer, and I think I'll say the same. It didn't really occur to me that that was an issue at all until I discovered there were some differences in terms of how people were remunerated or treated. And when I did, I decided I would question that and do something about it, and I have. And so as in my area in cell biology, there are quite a few women in science, but if we look at our staff, for instance, in our school, the more senior we get, the proportionally fewer women there are. I mean, there's lots of reasons for that. I wish it wasn't like that, but so there's still things to do. And so I don't think it's a disadvantage, but I think there are some differences, and we may still need to work harder at making sure that the differences that exist sometimes in how we approach it, or we just need to make our world a little bit more flexible with regards to certain things. And I think that would make a big difference, and we're working on that. And I think we're now in a place, and as a dean, I'm trying to establish a culture where at least we can talk about, we can question it. We can say, that for me particularly, it doesn't work. Whether that's because I'm a woman, or because I'm German, or I'm tall, or whatever, it doesn't matter. But we need to all be able to do that. And then it won't matter so much anymore going forward.
Fantastic. What a great answer. We're going to Leslie Ann next.
Very similar to Inka. I don't think I noticed. Quite a lot of the time, I just kind of, if you start looking around and you go, okay, there's lots of women like me around this about level, and then you go to a meeting with lots of higher up posh people, and you're like, boy, a lot of boys in this room, but people are making efforts to make it better. So it used to be you could sometimes go to a conference, and a conference is just where a lot of scientists get together and have a bit of a conflab, and you would just see all of the speakers would be men. And a lot of people are working very hard to look at conferences and say, actually, do you want to maybe think about getting a lady in to speak? I think the only thing I've had that was my specific challenge that I observed whilst I was working as a scientist was once or twice I've been in a meeting, we've been having a conversation about the science, and I've said something, and then about 5 minutes later a man has said it, and then everyone has listened to him, and I'd legitimately just said that. And that isn't a science thing. That's not particular to science. That's something that women have spoken about happening in all sorts of places. But what I will say is when I said that, they went, oh no, we didn't, sorry. And if everybody tries, then we can make things a lot better. And I think that's what we're all trying to do. So I don't think it was difficult per se, but there are challenges.
Fantastic. And Nicola, what about you?
I'm not sure I can really add anything to that, really. I think my reflections are pretty similar. Can I take a different question?
Go for it. Got 1 moment left. So
yeah, and that was about how do you work with your partners, I guess your teammates and things, and do you have arguments? And I would say that yes, being a scientist is about being able to have the arguments and being able to rationalize your point of view using the evidence. And so having disagreements or different perspectives, but being willing to listen to them is a really key part of listening to the perspectives of other people is a really key part of being a scientist. And that's how I'll leave it there, Ali. Was that short enough?
That's perfect. Thank you so much. And I think devastatingly, that means that we are out of time for this live event. So I want to thank each of our panelists for coming on, giving us your insight, your wisdom, some of your experiences. It's been absolutely fantastic. Thank you all so much. It's been a real treat. And of course, thank you to everyone in our audience for joining in. Thank you for your questions. There are so many of them. We'll keep working through them on Facebook. You can give us a follow on Twitter. We are at WCare Dundee, which we'll share on various websites and links. And I hope you continue enjoying the rest of the sleepover. It's been mad busy. I'm certainly having a great time and I hope you are. So thank you all. Have a fantastic rest of your day and we'll see you later. Have a good one, everyone.